You're welcome to another edition of your darling program, The Eat. This is a show where we discuss heated issues that bother the body politic of the country. As you know, we discuss issues ranging from politics to economics to socio-cultural issues, and of course, today's edition will not be any way different. I remain your host, Amuda Musibodi. It must be necessarily said that the week has been a beehive of activities ranging from the executive to the legislature and then to the judiciary. And of course, we've had a lot of activities that have gone on, within the course of the week. One of such activity was the eventual conferment of sanction on 38 newly promoted members of the bar to the status of SAN. And at the occasion yesterday, the Chief Justice of Nigeria made some very clear remarks which obviously have formed the basis of discussion in the body politic of the country. One of such was the fact that he said that even though, although his emergence as CJN came amidst some controversies, he was not going to allow the judiciary as another arm of government to be subservient to other arms of government or to anybody in power. And he also made clear positions as regards the need for clear-cut judicial independence and, of course, financial independence of the judiciary. In fact, in his remarks, he clearly stated that there is no way the judiciary can be truly independent if it has to go cap in hand to other arms of government to request funds. Well, the question is, will this or does this then necessarily mean that we need to begin to look at a CJN or even a judiciary or a Supreme Court that has the balls to decide issues without having to kowtow or having to bend its rules to the whims and caprices of any other person. Interestingly too, yesterday, one of the activities that went on was what happened in Kaduna State, and of course has occupied the front burner of discussions across the country. Yesterday, the governor of Kaduna State, in person of Malam El-Rufai, Nasir El-Rufai, fulfilled the promise he made in 2017, where and when he said that it was by 2019 when his son Abdul Sadiq will clock 6, he is going to ensure that he enrolls him in the public primary school. And yesterday he made good his promise by ensuring that he enrolled the son in the public primary school. Of course, there have been the naysayers and the naysayers as regards this activity. Some have said that it was nothing but just for the optics. In fact, some have asked the question, why take him to a school where that you just renovated with over 100 million naira? What happened to other schools that have not also enjoyed such renovations? But some have said, even if he has taken him to a school that has just been renovated, well, it would have been a good thing if other governors would also, or other political office holders would toe that part, and they would have something good for us, to deal with. Maybe that would also be a springboard for our educational system to bounce back to where it used to be. I know, interestingly too, which invariably would also form the focus of our discussion today, as I will be introducing my guest very soon, was the statement coming from two wings of the security arm of the country. The first was coming from the army, where the army chief said that they do not have the weapons to necessarily prosecute the insurgency war against Boko Haram. And people have asked the question, there was a $1 billion allocation to procure arms. What has happened to that? Does that mean that that money has gone down the drain? There was also another statement coming from the Police Service Commission that stated that the reason behind its stoppage of recruitment of police officers that was undertaken by the Nigerian Police Force was because a lot of persons in the list were padded and they were not qualified. And you recall that there had been a raging battle between the PSC, that's the Police Service Commission, and the administration of Nigerian police. And some have said that this is not a new trend, that it is something that is that we see there is a recurring decimal in our recruitment in the country, particularly when it comes to security agencies, from DSS to police to army, and of course to other security agencies. Now, this obviously will form the basis of our discussion today. But of course, I'll be expatiating more on that when we come back after this break. And of course, I would also be introducing my guest to you. course, thank you for staying with us after that short musical break. And I hope you enjoyed the rendition from Tiwa Bello, Greenland, and of course, Timi Dakolo's Great Nation. Now, like I told you before we went on that break, I was going to introduce my guest, but it's important to give a background information. When this administration came on board in 2015, the core of its campaign promises and of course its mandate was security, economy, and one would begin to ask 4 years down the line, have we been able to, or has there been an improvement in the state of insecurity or state of security in the country? Some would answer in the affirmative, while some would also answer in the negative. Although there have been some leaps made in the insurgency fight, but then we also had a new trend of security challenges. For instance, kidnapping has become more prominent, and then of course the killings by bandits who are largely referred to as herdsmen has also increased in geometric progression. So the question then is, Nigeria's security challenges, how far can we say of course we have gone? And of course it's important that you also know that I made mention of the crisis between the Police Service Commission and the police as regards recruitment. And here is a country, based on statistics, that of course the police officer to citizen ratio is one of the worst across the world. And then one begins to wonder why there would be a stop to any form of recruitment. But would one not also be right and of course justified to support the Police Service Commission, given its ground that the list was obviously the list included persons who were likely not qualified for the position? These and many other issues would form the focus of our discussion today. And I have with me to discuss this issue Dr. Olakunle Okunla. You are welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Olakunle Okunla is a security expert and a former British intelligence officer as well. Thank you once again for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's go straight to the discussion. Nigeria's security challenges.
Yeah.
What is your take?
Nigeria is a wonderful state. That's a wonderful state in the sense that one keeps wondering why this nation is still intact as one.
In view of the security?
In view of the security challenges. There are so many security challenges that we are having. The Boko Haram is there, the farmer elder clashes is there, the Islamic movement of Nigeria, IMN, the Zagzaki group is there, the Niger Delta, God is helping us on that one. Kidnapping is on the rise now. Then we have the porosity of our borders, okay, and others. We're in the midst of insecurity. From the north to the south, west and east, there are insurgencies almost every day. And something has to be done. Something has to be done as a matter of urgency. So
some have said that the reason, behind or why these specters of, insurgencies begin to rise in the Nigerian state is because over time the Nigerian state has always been, compensating every form of, dissent against the state. They gave the instance of, when Nadeko, obviously, if you say that, okay, they have a valid reason, stood against the state and were compensated with Yoruba presidency in 1999. They also gave the instance of, the Niger Delta, and of course we now have the Niger Delta Commission. They gave the instance of, a lot of other groups too that have always been compensated by the Nigerian state. Do you think that this argument will be a valid one?
It has never been a valid one. When you run away from your fight, you have just merely postponed the day of another fight, because that fight will definitely arise again. All over the world, you don't compensate security, anything that breaches security in a nation. You don't compensate them, as in you don't give them something to bring them down. When they finish what they have, they will come up again. As a nation, what I feel we should do, taking clue from other nations, is to fight these insurgencies and wipe them off. To fight and wipe them off. Very soon, all right, from the classified information and I'm hearing, okay, Boko Haram insurgency is coming up in a very intense way again. Niger Delta movement, Niger Delta people, they are warming up also, because they are clamoring that, after the former president left, okay, they have not done anything in terms of compensation. All right, compensation does not bring peace. Compensation kind of keep people together, all right, for a while, and after they've finished spending what they have, they come up again. As a nation, we are to fight every insurgency and wipe them off. That is the way to do it.
But if you, obviously following the trend of your argument, the line of your thought, that we should wipe them off, how do we go about this, knowing full well that most times a lot of these insurgent groups always lay claim to injustice being done to them? For instance, NADECO will say that the cancellation of the June 12 election was the reason for its actions. Then, of course, the Niger Delta militants also will say that the way the environmental pollution in the region is also the basis. And we've also seen Boko Haram coming up to say that, okay, there have been the killing of Mohammed Yusuf. Now, if all these are the arguments that, okay, the basis of our uprisings has been injustice, how would it be possible to ensure that we're able to nip them in the bud or wipe them off completely?
The problem of Nigeria has to do with the head. The head is sick, I'm sorry to say. The problem with Nigeria, if you look at all these insurgencies, one after the other, you realize that they are caused by the head. We're talking of Boko Haram. Boko Haram is a monster that was created by Nigerians and is now too big for them to control again. You just mentioned NADECO. Who cancelled the election? The head. Niger Delta movement. Okay? Who neglected that area? The head. So the problem of Nigeria is that the herdsmen, farmer class that we're having now, has to do with the head. Until we get the head right in Nigeria, I say it everywhere I go, we don't have any problem with the body in Nigeria. Sincerely, we don't. The body, the people react after they have been pushed too much to the wall. And these people are not even reacting again. Okay? The problem with Nigeria is the policies of our leaders are not helping. And that is why we are giving rises to all these security challenges that we are having.
Okay, let me quickly ask you. Just recently, in the course of the past week, the army came out and said that it does not have the weapons to prosecute the insurgency battle against Boko Haram and whatever Islamic movements or whatever you want to call them. What do we make of this?
What do we make? I just mentioned that the problem we have in Nigeria was the head. The last government, okay, there was a huge amount of money earmarked to purchase weapon, okay, to fight Boko Haram. Where is the money today?
But there are prosecutions going on. At least we have the court martial of.
I just asked, where is the money? I know that there are prosecutions going on, okay. So money have been collected. Where are those money? All right. If I'm going to the market to buy, let's say, rice, and you took my money and I got it back, what should I do with my money that I got? Go and buy what I want. I even praise the soldiers that were arming, especially the guys that are on the battle line confronting people. I praise them, because if you see how obsolete the weapons they carry, the weapon and ammunition they carry, you will marvel. I've been privileged to handle weapons before, and I understand the power behind weapon.
Well, some have said that the Nigerian army still uses Soviet era kind of weapons, while Boko Haram insurgents are now using Russia high-tech weapons.
Whose fault? Whose fault? The head. The head. I was on a program, on a TV program, asking me, how come the Nigerian government, okay, cannot boast of superior weapon, okay, compared to Boko Haram insurgents, and I say, how would they be able to boast? Do you know the people behind this Boko Haram sect? Do you know how they get their money? Take for instance, we have about 102 or 103 man borders in Nigeria. We have about 304 unmanned borders.
And a lot of these unmanned borders are in the north.
And this is where this weapon come from. June 1st, the federal government of Nigeria seized, there was a decree that every licensed weapon in Nigeria has been proscribed. So if you have a license for a weapon, okay, you can't use the weapon again. You have to go and submit the weapon to the government. Then I asked a question. I was on a particular program. I asked a question that, what about the weapons in the hands of the insurgencies?
Some even said that prescription was an attempt to empower the X-Men against...
Does it not look like that, my brother? A thief is coming to my house with weapons. I have a weapon in my house to defend myself. And the head of my family says, go and drop your weapon. Knowing that, all right, I'm under a threat. So what is that?
Maybe it's depending on Pentecostal prowess. All right. Now that was on the lighter note. Now let me come down to the issue of funding. You obviously made allusion to the fact that Boko Haram and of course ISWAP as it were are getting adequate funding.
Yes.
Now can we really say that the Nigerian army enjoys as much adequate funding as these insurgents?
We get more than the insurgencies, but it's diverted to other means. How much is ISWAP getting? ISWAP is getting money only from Iraq and Kuwait. That's where they're getting money from.
You're really making serious allegations there about getting money from ISWAP, getting money from Iraq and Kuwait.
So it's obvious that they're getting money. When the original leader of Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf, when he was killed, 2015, and everybody felt that 2009 rather, sorry, everybody felt that was the end. We break peace. That was the end. Until eventually, when some fractions of the insurgency came up here and then, and suddenly I still have the video that the guy just came up in the name of Shekau, that I'm now the leader of Boko Haram, and he listed the 4 cardinal points, what they wanted. Okay, and this is still what they're pursuing. And he said that his own style is quite different from the leader that was killed. He is aggressive, he is brutal, all right. He can pull down, he can destroy.
But hasn't that been obvious with the camera killings that ISWAP has carried out in the past 2 years?
That is what I am saying. Okay, he told Nigerian government that this is his own style of governance, and he did something that was very, 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 touching. Then there was a link with Iraq and Iran, because there were some other leaders from the fractions of Boko Haram, they rose against him. So he linked up with Iraq and Iran, and they were funding him heavily. But that fund is nothing compared to what Nigeria state is making and is getting as revenue. Okay, but the problem is that the Boko Haram and ISWAP, they divert their money to the cause.
They are fighting
Nigerian state. But the money Nigerian gets, even the one that is assigned for security, is being diverted to other means.
Okay, let me quickly ask you this, because some have said that the president is being conservative by not changing the service chiefs. And they have made reference to a lot of the assertions that we've seen on the battlefield by soldiers. Particularly, they gave example of the Metele massacre, which the army has denied severally. Now, do you also agree that there's a need for us to change the service chiefs? That some people say that they've actually run out of ideas. They've run out of ideas.
If I appoint you or I employ you, and I tell you this is my agenda, this is what I want to do, okay, for you to stay employed with me what will you do? You have to do what I want. So change the army chiefs over and over and over again. We are still going to have the same result, because it is whatever the leader tells them, this is what I'm pursuing, that is what they will pursue.
Okay, so you are saying that the change of army chiefs does not is actually
it doesn't really help.
But some people have said that these people have run, because we saw that when these army chiefs were appointed, we recorded some leaps and bounds in terms of the war against insurgency. But in the past 2 years, what we've seen are actually, a lot of unfavorable news as regards attacks on the army and, of course, army facilities. So does it not mean that there's a need to have, an infusion of fresh?
The president
blood
of Nigeria, whether civilian or military, is the general commanding officer of Nigeria, is the one in charge, and that power is enormous. Trump does not have that power. The Prime Minister of Britain does not have that power. The Navy, the Army, the police cannot act autonomously. Before they do a thing, the IG, Inspector General of Police, must seek the opinion of the president. If he says don't, then you can't, unless you want your job on the line.
So you are saying that the problem is not the service chiefs, but the president or the presidency?
Is the head, whoever is the head. The problem of Nigeria has to do with the head.
Okay, I know that some people may not agree with you on that, but we'll definitely continue from there after this short break. Of course, I still have with me my guest, Dr. Olakunle Okunla, who is a security expert and a former British intelligence officer. Thank you again for still being with us.
Thank you
now, let's go to the issue of the current rift between the Police Service Commission and the police force as regards recruitment. What do you think is the problem?
Politics.
Politics?
It's politics.
How do you mean?
Okay. From my last check, in the whole of Nigeria, the Nigerian police, there are 38,000 officers. 38,000. The whole of Nigeria. And that is way too small.
Isn't that the reason why the Nigerian police is rated as the worst in the world?
I wouldn't agree that Nigerian police is the worst in the world.
But the indices was, one of the indices for such rating was police to citizen ratio, which we cannot deny the fact that it's a
In fact, I will bet to differ on that. I will want to, say that Nigerian police is one of the best in the world.
What would be your basis? That's coming as a surprise.
Nigerian police is one of the best in the world. Nigerian police, if they are equipped like their counterparts, especially in the Western world, Nigeria will perform far better than even the Metropolitan Police in the UK. People look at...
Are they getting that training to ensure that?
They're getting... No, they don't have the facilities to be trained. That is number one, like their counterparts all over the world. And number two, they don't have the equipment to perform. These guys are using obsolete equipment and methods, and yet they're still able to do what they're doing. Look at the case of Wedume. Okay? That tells you that if Nigerian police are motivated, they can perform. I'd always believed that they can perform. All right? So I'm not going to...
Is it not the case that they only perform when it comes to high-tech, criminal issues?
If they perform at high-tech criminal issue, then they are good. then they are very, very good. If they perform at high-tech criminal issues, they are very good. Because if they could perform at that level, then at the low-tech, they could perform as well. But they are not enough. This is a situation wherein one person is doing 8 man's job. Okay? Have you wondered, maybe as you drive to your home, when I go out in the morning around 6 o'clock, a particular traffic ward, the police officer that is at a particular junction, when I'm coming back in the evening,
He's still there.
He's still there. From 6 to 8. And I wonder, what about the shifting? One day I stopped by to appreciate one of the guys, because I said I saw you when I was driving out and we are still here. He said, I'm going to be here till around 9:10 until they call me. Why? Because there's nobody to assist. All over the world, we operate maximum 8 hours. In England, it's 6-7 hours. And you see something that is working from 6 to 6, that's 12 hours. You should praise that person. And he's doing that every day. Not that you work 2 days and 1 day you are off. So apparently, we need more officers to be recruited.
So what then is the politics in this rift between the Police Service Commission and the IG? You mentioned that
who gave the order that there should be recruitment?
The president.
Why are they now denying that the recruitment is not from the right authority?
No. I think let's be clear. The argument of the Police Service Commission is not about the right authority giving the order, but rather that the officers or the intended officers who have been recruited have a lot of them not even meeting the requirement. And as the Police Service Commission, which is saddled with the responsibility of overseeing the affairs of police, it is their duty to stop such a recruitment. And many police officers or former police officers have also alluded to this, that it's usually the norm when you're doing when recruitment is done into the police force. So are you saying, because I still want to
see, there is a body that the police, all right, has assigned the duty of recruiting officers onto. That is their duty. Okay, that is the duty. Now, if the police commissioner now saying that body, all right, is not recruiting people that are fit enough, whose problem is that? It's still the problem of the police.
But the Police Service Commission, consists of a lot of retired Inspector General Police, who obviously are seniors in the service to the current IG. So would that not be right, having understood how things are done? Particularly you have the likes of Mr. Michael Kiro and a lot of other persons too who are in that Police Service Commission. Would that not be right, having understood the politics and dynamics of police recruitment, to put a stop to the recruitment process that has been undertaken?
Why can't you call a spade a spade? Why can't you just say the Police Commission is corrupt, instead of shifting blames from one section of one department of the police to another one? This is clear corruption. Okay,
but you don't whisper to people you can shout to, and you don't shout to people you can whisper to.
Sometimes you do. Husband and wife, sometimes, they whisper and sometimes they shout. If I'm telling you things with a low voice and you refuse to listen, then I'm going to shout.
Okay,
maybe you are not
so
hearing me.
What then would you suggest as a way out? Because obviously there have been reports, even way back 2017, that Nigeria needs over 155,000 police personnel to up, and of course to be able to meet up with the UN requirement. And at this moment now, we're having a peg on a pause on such recruitment. What is the way out? I
just saw that from my last check, which was about 2 months ago, we have 38,000 in the whole of Nigeria. Okay, and
38,000.
38,000 police officers. That's what I'm saying. These guys are working.
38,000 against over 200 million citizens.
Yes, and they should be at least 180,000. Statistically, one person is doing the work of 8 persons. You need to see how tired and how weary they are after coming from operation. The Wadume case that everybody is praising the police for, which I do. Okay, only God knows how those guys were able to do it. Because the day that they left Abuja to go to Taraba to pick the guy, okay, they had to sleep overnight in a police station. Look at that high caliber. These IGP
special.
They had to sleep in one police station, and they were moving around in a bus.
Whereas they could have actually taken a flight. What happens to it? So even our chairman local government, when they go for operation, they go to 5,000 hotel. These guys are doing the work because they are passionate about it. That's what their leader Abuki, that's what he said, because they are passionate about it. If they are taking a bulletproof van that day, all right, the incident that happened with the army wouldn't have happened. But would that not have raised unnecessary suspicion? Because if you are undertaking an undercover operation, and then you take a bulletproof van, that would have drawn the attention of people around the area that something covert, something security covert operation is going on.
It doesn't have to be police. Does not have to be written all over the car. It doesn't. The car that the captain used, okay, to take Wadume back to Taraba was bulletproof. There was no name on it. Okay,
now let's quickly look at, before we call it a day. Let's look at the issue of funding for the police. We have looked at funding for the army. Funding for the police. There was a report I read some time ago that each police station in Nigeria gets monthly 3,000 naira as subvention to take care of the police, to take care of the station and the likes. And one begins to wonder, how do we expect the police? So what exactly is your own take about the issue of funding for the police, and then how do we get out of this quagmire?
I was as an undercover agent, I visited some a police station, divisional police station. I spoke with the DPOs. There have been reports, allegations that anytime there is a robbery or anything, and they call the police, you always say there is no fuel. All right? And 4 out of the 5 that I went to say, actually, we are not funded. The 3,000 that you're talking about, they don't even get it. They don't get it.
But a lot of times, these police stations get free fuel from the filling stations around them.
They are not supposed to get free fuel. Okay, they're just using the goodwill, just the goodwill. All right, if I have a fueling station, it is not mandatory that anytime police van comes, I have to fill it. It's goodwill. I want to wet the ground. That's what they are doing, so that if anything happens, because I wet the ground. Yes. Okay. They are not well funded. Most stations have to fund themselves by themselves. That is why you see roadblocks. Okay. Recently, I went to a particular station. I don't want to mention the place, and the DPO was not around, so I was giving the DCO was getting my message. As we were talking, a guy came with about 3 or 4 police uniform to deliver, and I asked him, "What's this?" He said, "This is my uniform." Okay. I said, "Do you give your uniform out to people?" He said, "That's my tailor." All right. In Nigeria, as a police officer, if you want to look good, you sew your uniform yourself.
But even without the issue of looking good, do police officers actually get uniforms?
They don't get uniform. Once you pass out, that is the only thing. If you want to have good uniform, you have to be sewing it. Officers can do that.
What then would be the implication of this in every sense of the word?
A lot of implication. The tailor that can sew uniform for police can also sew uniform for
criminals.
That's where you see criminals with branded cars wearing a police uniform, and they stop you. You think that you are, stopping for officers, whereas they are robbers. This is what I said. The problem of Nigeria has to do with the head. If I send my child to school, Abba, I should be able to give him maintenance, fee. I should be able to do that. I should not expect them to sew uniform by themselves. It should be forbidden. I cannot imagine any of them, not even Marks and Spencer, saying I want to sew police uniform, metropolitan uniform in UK. No. Where will you get the authority from? But here we have roadside tailors sewing uniform for our officers.
And sometimes slim fit uniforms too.
Slim fit uniform. You have seen that. There's shoes, you have to buy your shoe. Everything. And those that cannot buy, they are disgraced.
Okay, let me just ask you this as we wrap up. Nigeria's security challenges, what then is the way forward?
The government, when you talk of these challenges brought together, there are so many things that are involved. Number one, corruption. It takes the grace of God, okay, for you and I to go to the same school, maybe have the same degree, okay, start working at the same time, and 2, 3, 4 years because of the opportunity you have, all right, you are up there, and I'm still there because you have the opportunity to get things in a corrupt way. It will take the grace of God for me
not to want to
do that. That is the reason for kidnapping, illiteracy. All these Boko Haram guys that have been apprehended, all right, most of them cannot speak English at all. The way education can transform you. Education is like light. It will beam and you just see differently from how you used to see. As long as the level of illiteracy in Nigeria is more than the literacy one, will still continue to have problems because people will be able to brainwash them. Number two. Number three, we have an influx of arm and ammunition into the country. And that's the porosity of our borders. Nigerian government must do something about our porous borders. Our border is not as large, as big as US border. Okay? Recently, Donald Trump made, he made the determination that he was going to build wall because of the influx of Mexicans into America. And he's doing it. It is going to cost a lot of money, but it's going to bring peace of mind. When you have over 100 porous borders, unmanned borders, ammunitions will come in.
On a free flow.
Illegal drugs will come in. Okay, Nigeria government has to do something about it. Then, bad leadership. Nigerian government has got to do something about the issue of bad leadership. I read the history of the transformation of Singapore recently, and I wish everybody, all our leaders should be able to read it. Between 1965, when they got their independence, and now, Singapore transformed from a third world country to a first world country.
I wish we could go on and on, with these your propositions on the way forward, but unfortunately, time definitely is not on our side. Thank you so much for coming on the edition of the program.
You so very much.
It's a pleasure having you around. Of course, my guest has been Dr. Olakunle Okunla, a security expert and a former British intelligence officer. Like I tell you, the discussion does not end there. It continues in your living room, it continues in your bedroom, it continues in the church, it continues in the mosque, it continues at the newspaper stand, it continues in the office, it continues in at every single place you find yourself. Till I come your way again, I remain your host, Amuda Mosibodi. Bye for now.